$100 billion lie. America's water system is about to poison every major city. The sirens start before sunrise. A nurse twists the hospital tap. Brown water coughs out. In City Hall, the mayor's voice cracks. Do not drink the water. Grocery shelves vanish in an hour. Firefighters crack a hydrant and get a trickle. Parents stare at baby bottles, frozen. Rewind to an ordinary morning. Coffee brewing, school fountains wrapped in plastic, utility crews already on their third break of the day. The stakes aren't abstract. Kids' brains, dialysis machines, property values, trust. We were promised a $100 billion fix. It isn't enough. To understand why a modern city can't guarantee clean water, we go back. The system beneath our feet. Start where the water starts. A river, a reservoir, an underground aquifer. It doesn't matter how pristine the postcard looks, the journey is long. Raw water hits the plant, coagulants stirred like a chef folding batter, particles clumping, settling. Filters scrub what the eye can't see. Disinfection follows, chlorine biting into the last survivors. Then the gates open, and treated water surges into a maze most people never think about. Thousands of cities, tens of thousands of utilities, and millions of miles of pipe. That fragmentation matters. A metropolis might run an empire of tunnels and pumps. A small township might depend on one tired operator and a garage full of parts that don't quite fit. Each system is its own puzzle, stitched together by decades of decisions and a budget that always came up short. Under the pavement, the materials tell the story of time. Heavy cast iron laid before cars were common. Ductile iron from the mid-century boom. PVC where money stretched. Asbestos cement where history left a warning. And the smallest, most dangerous links, lead service lines threading from mains to homes, installed because lead bends easily and lasts until the chemistry changes. If the water's pH drifts, if the plant misses a dosage of orthophosphate, if a cheaper source gets swapped in without recalculating corrosion control, those quiet gray straws can leach metal right into the glass. Age isn't just a number, it's pressure, temperature, and soil at war with steel and plastic. Freeze-thaw cycles jackhammer the ground. Pressure spikes, what operators call water hammer, slam into joints. In corrosive soils, pipes pit from the outside in. You don't see it until a street lifts at 3 a.m. and a geyser writes a question mark into the night sky. Multiply that by a country and you get a drumbeat. A water main break every few minutes, losses you can't bill, and every break a chance for dirt and microbes to creep in when the pressure drops. But leaks are just the symptom. What's inside the pipes and how it behaves decides whether a city keeps its promise. Corrosion control is chemistry as governance. Orthophosphate lays down a mineral film on the inside of lead and iron pipes, a thin shield that keeps the water from scraping off metal. It's cheap insurance until it isn't there. Switch sources to save money and the water's aggressiveness changes. Miss the feed because the chemical tanker is delayed and the film dissolves. Residents don't feel the chemistry shift. They feel the headaches, the rashes, the letters that arrive weeks too late. Scale makes everything harder. A big utility with lab staff and redundancy can chase down anomalies, tweak feeds, swap filters. A small system juggling payroll and patch kits has to triage. Meanwhile, fragmentation means no single map of risk. One neighborhood might have plastic laterals from the 2000s. The next block still drinks through lead installed before World War II. Inventory records live in binders, in retirements, in the memory of a foreman who left last fall. Out of sight, out of budget is the politics of pipes. A council will fund a new park. A century-old main 2 meters under an avenue can wait 1 more year. That year becomes 10, then 30. When it fails, the costs aren't just the backhoe and the asphalt. Restaurants dump inventory. Schools call parents again. Insurance adjusters argue about saturated basements. Utilities eat losses from water that never reached a meter. Each component along the way has a failure mode with a human face. A stuck valve turns a neighborhood into a dead end with stale water. A booster pump offline means a hospital's upper floors run dry. A storage tank that wasn't cleaned on schedule seeds biofilm, and suddenly operators are fighting compliance with chlorine they don't have in stock. The supply chain, quiet, brittle, folds into the story. If a plant can't get coagulant or a disinfectant shipment gets rerouted during a storm, Operators improvise within inches of the law and the line between safe and unsafe. Governance adds another layer. Thousands of utilities, each with its own board, rate structure, and priorities. Federal rules set limits. Local realities decide what gets done this budget cycle. Raising rates is political. Cutting maintenance is invisible until it is. The result is a maintenance backlog that can't be seen from the dais. It sits under boulevards and schoolyards, wearing down, waiting for a cold snap or a dry summer to tip the system. Here's the quiet part. Water doesn't just flow, it communicates. Pressure waves tell stories of leaks and sudden opens. Smart meters and acoustic ears can hear them if there's money and staff to listen. Too often, the listening comes after the noise, after the boil water advisory, after the fire truck finds a dead hydrant, after parents fill sinks with bottled water and wash the lettuce anyway because dinner can't wait. To understand the danger, you don't have to invent a villain. You only have to walk the map, source to plant, plant to pipe, pipe to tap. At every step, time has been the strongest corrosive. The system kept working, so letters kept waiting, but the chemistry doesn't wait. And what's lurking in that small line between the main and the kitchen, what's been there for a century, can undo everything upstream. Lead, the quiet sabotage. Start with a decision made a century ago. Cities chose lead because it bent without breaking, slid around corners, and didn't rust like iron. It made installation fast and cheap. Utilities, plumbers, and even older federal guidance allowed it until the 1986 federal ban on new lead service line installations. Neighborhoods filled with tidy bungalows got a hidden upgrade, a lead straw from the main to the basement wall. No one selling those lines had to live with them for 100 years. Families would. Lead works until chemistry changes. Corrosion control is the thin shield between safety and slow poisoning. Orthophosphate forms a microscopic armor on the inside of lead pipes. Stable pH helps it stay put. When the water stays gentle, lead stays quiet. Change source water, disrupt pH, cut the orthophosphate dose, and that armor sloughs off. The water, suddenly hungry, strips lead ions into every kitchen it passes. You don't see it, you don't smell it, you pour it into oatmeal. The harm lands hardest on children. Lead interferes with neural development, lowering IQ and tightening the world of possibility. Teachers meet it before doctors do. Attention drifts, behavior frays, reading lags. There's no safe level. The cost is carried across decades. Special education budgets, courtrooms, lost wages, grandparents who become tutors because the school can't catch up. Adults aren't spared. Hypertension, kidney stress, pregnancy complications, all from a metal that never had a biological job. Flint taught the chemistry lesson in public. Switch water to save money, neglect corrosion control, and the shield breaks. But the lesson didn't start or end there. Newark's sampling climbed, then spiked, then forced a sprint. The city pivoted hard, re-optimized corrosion control, and launched one of the fastest lead service line replacement campaigns in the country. Bonds, federal aid, contractors by the dozen, permissions, slips on clipboards. Crews went block by block, cutting out lead on both sides of the property line because a partial fix can make things worse. When you replace only the public half, you disturb scales and increase lead release. The only responsible solution is full replacement, curb to meter, meter to faucet. Chicago's challenge is sheer scale. The city installed lead service lines by design for decades, long after other cities stopped. Dense blocks, deep winters, and a backlog counted in 6 figures. Replacement is slower, expensive, and complicated by consent. Whose pipe is it? On paper, homeowners own the private side. In reality, the water utility controls the chemistry that turns that private asset into a public risk. Landlords delay. Tenants can't approve digs. Residents fear surprise bills. Meanwhile, small towns with thin staff and thinner budgets struggle to inventory what they even have. Some haven't mapped service materials at all. The danger hides in file cabinets and in houses nobody inspects. The federal promise borrows authority from deadlines. Replace all lead service lines within roughly a decade, that's the headline. But money moves differently than mandates. Grants arrive as one-time bursts. The work requires steady crews, steady purchasing, steady outreach. Digging up a block means permits, traffic, landscapers, plumbers, inspectors, translators to navigate distrust. Every property line is a legal line too. If the private half costs a homeowner thousands, They'll say no, or they'll just hope the city swaps the rest of the street and leaves theirs alone. That's the quiet clause that derails plans, the ownership split that shifts costs and slows consent. Cities that solved it made the fix free to residents. The bill moved to bonds and budgets, not to kitchen tables. Chemistry can buy time, but not forever. Orthophosphate doesn't remove lead, it manages it. The coating needs consistent dosing and stable water quality. Supply chain hiccups, delayed deliveries of phosphate or caustic put operators in a bind. Swap substitutes, stretch inventory, cross fingers. Residents don't hear that part. They hear flushing recommended. They get a filter if the city can afford it. Filters work when the cartridges are replaced on schedule. Cartridges cost money, and households juggle groceries, rent, and deadlines. A box of filters sits on a counter until payday, then next payday. The human stories stack. A mom in a duplex runs the tap every morning for 5 minutes because someone told her it helps. It does sometimes. A pediatrician keeps a stash of lead test kits and signs extra referrals. A school maintenance chief brings in bottled water for fountains and argues with procurement to speed up fixture replacements because the district's budget assumed the water was fine. There's a temptation to say this is history, that lead's a relic. It is. Hundreds of thousands, likely millions, of service lines remain. Some are buried under streets that were repaved last year. Some run under porches built over the decades, traps for any crew without a patient neighbor. Utilities with good inventories move faster. Those without are knocking doors with clipboards and magnets, trying to figure out what's under dirt poured in 1926. Even when the work begins, trust pulls it along or drags it down. Cities that disclose sampling results in plain language, that show maps, that admit uncertainty, get more signatures. Cities that hedge and delay find lawyers at the door and residents at council meetings with jars. What nobody knew at the time of installation is obvious now. The cheapest pipe became one of the most expensive debts. Full replacement, free at the tap, is the only clean ending to this part of the story. Until then, chemistry holds the line, and sometimes it doesn't. PFAS and the new contaminants. Even if every lead line vanished tomorrow, something else is already moving through the system. It doesn't taste metallic, and it doesn't cloud a glass. PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, were designed to be slippery, heat-proof, and stubborn. That stubbornness made them useful in non-stick pans, waterproof jackets, stain-resistant carpets, food wrappers, and the firefighting foam sprayed for decades at airports and military bases. Stubborn in a lab became forever in a river. PFAS don't break down easily. Rain washes them off runways and factory yards into creeks. They sink into aquifers and drift with groundwater. Once they reach a wellfield or reservoir, they don't politely settle out. Standard treatment, coagulation, filtration, disinfection glides right past them. Operators can't add a simple dose and make them disappear. Utilities have to decide whether to layer on new technology or warn residents and hope a federal deadline buys time. The science lands close to home. PFAS have been linked to immune suppression, certain cancers, thyroid disruption, and developmental harms. Parents hear about vaccine response dampened in kids. Families ask about pregnancy, about breastfeeding, about what shows up in blood. There's uncertainty, and that's its own weight. You can't boil PFAS away. You can't see progress in a picture. People want numbers and a plan, and many systems can't give either quickly. The rules are catching up. New maximum contaminant levels and a hazard index push utilities to test and treat. Testing isn't cheap. You don't dip a strip and read a color. You ship samples to certified labs, wait for results, and repeat. For small systems, the lab bill alone dents a budget. If results come back high, the choices narrow. Activate granular activated carbon, ion exchange resins, or membranes. Each works with trade-offs. Carbon beds need frequent changeouts when levels are high. Resins grab PFAS efficiently but generate waste. High-pressure membranes produce a clean stream and a concentrated brine you still have to dispose of. None of that fits neatly into last year's rate study. Meanwhile, utilities stare at liability from both sides. If they don't treat, they risk violations and lawsuits. If they do treat and backbill manufacturers, they enter a legal maze where settlement funds arrive with restrictions and timelines that don't match construction seasons. Residents watch headlines about billion-dollar settlements and expect instant fixes at the tap. Utility managers read the fine print and see pounds per year allocations, reimbursement schedules, and paperwork that needs lawyers and accountants they don't have. Where you live changes the flavor of the problem. Airports and military installations trained with firefighting foam that soak training grounds. The plumes beneath them don't respect city lines. Rural towns downstream find their wells creeping up over time, even if they never had a factory. Urban systems often blend sources. One contaminated intake can seed an entire grid. Regional aquifers stitch suburbs and farms together. A contaminated base can effectively become the headwaters of a county's water supply. Here's the utility dilemma in real time. You're a plant superintendent. Your quarterly PFAS results jump just over the new limit. You can throttle pumps from the worst well, blend with cleaner sources, and shave the peak. That buys months, not years. You call vendors. Lead times stretch because every system in the region is calling the same week. You pencil a temporary carbon system into the parking lot and pray the electrician can squeeze you in. In the council chamber, residents hold test kits they bought online. They don't trust blending, they want removal. Money complicates every decision. Grants come with match requirements. Rate increases trigger affordability alarms. If you're already replacing lead lines and chasing main breaks, PFAS treatment looks like the extra straw. Some cities stand up stopgaps, point-of-use filters for sensitive households, schools, and clinics. Those work when maintained. Someone has to change cartridges, verify performance, track serial numbers. Staff already running on fumes now run logistics for 1,000 tiny treatment plants inside kitchens. Manufacturers argue that PFAS at low levels need context, that risk is relative and standards conservative. Communities answer with cancer clusters and a simple demand: don't make our taps your disposal plan. Regulators try to thread the needle with phased timelines and indices that account for multiple PFAS acting together. For example, EPA's hazard index approach alongside individual MCLs for PFOA and PFOS. It's rational on paper. On the ground, the calendar is unforgiving. Contracts, groundbreakings, and pilot studies move in seasons. Exposure moves in days. The hardest part to swallow is that PFAS are a mirror. They show how a water system built for yesterday's contaminants struggles with tomorrow's. They force choices between fast and perfect, between legal compliance and moral comfort. Even if the chemistry is cutting edge, the trust equation is old. Tell people what you know, what you don't, and what you'll do next. Because the pipes don't care what we call these molecules. They carry what they're given. And right now, too many systems are carrying forever. Anatomy of a break. Cold makes pipes honest. The first deep freeze of the year turns soil into a vice. As it thaws, the ground shifts, and a century-old main finally says enough. Pressure inside wants out. At 3 a.m., a hairline floor becomes a tear, then a rupture. The street sags, then heaves. A manhole burps brown water. In the control room, a pressure alarm blinks, then another, marching across a map like a slow-motion heart attack. Operators grab radios. Which valves isolate the block without starving the hospital? On paper, there's a grid. In the street, a valve won't turn. Crews haul a key the size of a spear and lean into it. It squeals, then stops. Years of sediment and rust have glued it half open. Water keeps roaring. A dispatcher weighs the ugly choice: close a bigger valve upstream and depressurize 3 neighborhoods, or let the break chew a crater that swallows a bus. This is where physics meets people. Pressure holds the world out of the pipes. Lose it and the world seeps in. Backflow from a sprinkler system that isn't protected. A cross-connection someone rigged in a basement to fill a pool. Dirt and microbes pulled through hairline joints as the system gasps. The decision lands on a sentence residents will read on their phones before sunrise: boil water advisory. Boil for a minute, cool, pour. Do it for formula, for coffee, for brushing teeth. Restaurants close. Schools pivot to bottled water if they can find it. Meanwhile, firefighters roll up to a hydrant 2 blocks away for a kitchen fire that can't wait. The hydrant hisses weakly. It's tied to the same failing loop. A pumper truck has to draft from a different main, while the crew stretches hose through yards and over fences. The paradox stings. The network that's supposed to protect you can't protect itself when it's hurt. A good system has redundancy. An old system has nostalgia. Back at the hole, the crew saws the street open and digs into wet clay. The pipe is cast iron, stamped with a foundry mark no one recognizes anymore. The break looks like a spiral fracture on an X-ray, edges jagged like teeth. They clamp it if they can, they cut and replace if they can't. Every minute costs water, confidence, and eventually money. The utility will eat unbilled losses. Businesses will file claims for ruined inventory and soaked basements. Insurance adjusters will want photos, forms, and a clear villain. There isn't one, there's only time. When the crew finally closes the repair, the plant ramps pressure carefully. Water hammer, the sudden slam of moving water, can turn one fix into 5 failures. Air pockets shoot down the line like bullets and smack into elbows. Operators crack hydrants to bleed the system, sending rusty water into gutters and social media. Residents film brown fountains and call the news. The chemistry team grabs samples to verify residual chlorine stayed above the floor. If not, the advisory holds. Nobody wants to be the one who lifted it too early. Economic ripples run on their own clock. The city suspends parking on a commercial strip for days, then owes the shops a conversation it can't afford. A bakery tosses dough twice. A dialysis center calls patients back-to-back to reschedule because they can't risk incoming water, even boiled. The road needs to be patched, then paved. Winter delays the asphalt plant. Cones sit like accusations. While this is unfolding, the control room juggles the next alarms. Pressure transients travel far. A stuck valve miles away reveals itself when a neighborhood reports banging pipes. A storage tank level drops faster than modeled because the leak bled a zone dry. Field maps don't match reality. A retired foreman would know, but he's fishing in Florida. A young operator learns the network's muscle memory by failure. And here's the part that doesn't make the press conference. Every break is also a meeting with the budget. Spare pipe on the yard rack, maybe. The length they need, maybe not. A procurement policy that requires 3 quotes for clamps. Fine in June, absurd at 4 a.m., the warehouse clerk left last month. The new hire can't find the right gaskets. Someone drives across town to borrow from a neighboring utility under a handshake that predates both managers. In the aftermath, council members ask why this main wasn't on the replacement list. It was, just not this year. Asset managers bring up break history, soil corrosivity maps, pipe age. Residents bring up baby bottles and a fire that almost jumped a roof because a hydrant sputtered. Everyone is right. The network is a body that's been living on painkillers and short walks. Breaks drain budgets, time, and trust. And yet the bigger hole isn't in the street. It's on the balance sheet, where the cost of not replacing pipes keeps winning because it's quiet, until the ground opens and reminds everyone what deferred maintenance really sounds like. The $100 billion lie. The morning after a break, the podium language always sounds confident. Big numbers, bold timelines. A governor holds a backdrop that reads investing in our water. One phrase keeps getting repeated, $100 billion. It sounds like rescue. It sounds like the trucks will roll tomorrow. But when the checks clear and the contracts land, the arithmetic refuses to play along. Here's the gap. The headline is a one-time shot. The need is a mortgage. Lead service line replacement alone can swallow tens of billions, block by block, lawn by lawn, with crews you have to keep employed for a decade, not for a press cycle. Add in failing mains that leak and burst. Add PFAS treatment trains that aren't plug and play and need electricity, operators, media changeouts, and disposal. Add aging treatment plants with filters that shed gravel and tanks that need seismic retrofits. Add sewers that back up into basements when it rains like yesterday happens every month. The order of magnitude outgrows the banner in the photo. Politically, one-time grants feel good. You announce, you cut a ribbon, you move on. But water systems don't move on. They run every hour of every day and their bills do too. Chemicals spike in price. Electricity goes up. A pump fails and drags a motor with it. A $5 part in a valve turns into a $50,000 excavation because nobody touched it for 20 years. Meanwhile, federal shares of water funding have slipped over decades, so local ratepayers carry heavier loads. When a mayor says, "We got $50 million," it helps. When the utility budget says, "We need $200 million over 5 years," everyone gets quiet. The quiet clause sits in the fine print of ownership. The line from the main to your house is often yours, not the city's. On paper, that made sense when lead was just a plumbing choice. Now it's a public health hazard that crosses a property line like smoke. Mandates arrive. Replace all lead service lines within a decade. but who pays for the half that belongs to a homeowner who can't take a surprise bill? If the city replaces only its piece, the partial can spike lead release. So utilities face an ugly triangle: legal boundaries, health reality, and budgets that don't include thousands per house for the private side. The cities that move fastest erase that line with policy, full replacement, free to the resident, and push the cost onto bonds and long-term plans. The cities that don't stall out at the front door. Vote-drops prefer deadlines, 10 years, or lead out, PFAS below limits by 2027. The camera doesn't linger on supply chains or labor markets. Every utility competing for the same trained crews and the same treatment media creates delays the mandate clock doesn't see. Procurement rules that protect against waste can slow essential buys. A carbon filter vendor quotes a 6-month lead time because everyone else called last week. By the time the rigs roll, the new rule's first milestone already passed. Fines help no one when the rate base is the only pocket. Ratepayers feel this as envelopes. Bills climb. Families decide which month to pay in full and which month to float. Shut-off moratoria lapse. Notices go out. The poorest zip codes already carrying health burdens carry the highest percentage of income spent on water. Affordability programs exist, but they're patchwork and underfunded. Water is life, but in practice, it's a line item that can get cut in a crisis. That's how public health becomes a balance sheet. Utilities, caught between promises and physics, get mandates without the tail money. Replace, treat, inspect, report. Do it under consent decrees if you've already failed. Do it with a workforce that's retiring faster than you can certify new operators. Tell residents to trust the timeline while you juggle debt service and chemical bids that expire in 30 days. The lie isn't that money exists. It's that the amount and the structure match the scale and the grind. They don't. Then there's liability. PFAS settlements make headlines in the billions, but the checks arrive with allocation formulas and documentation hurdles. Cities tally their costs and discover the fund covers a fraction and forbids using it on anything except specified equipment. Meanwhile, insurers narrow coverage or exclude contamination altogether. Bond markets read the risk and price it in. Borrowing gets more expensive for the systems that need it most. A city with a history of violations pays a premium to fix the very problems that triggered the premium. Residents see contradiction. Leaders promise safety, advisories still pop up. Money is secured, nothing changes on their block. That gap breeds anger, then apathy. And apathy is its own corrosion, because nothing breaks a system faster than voters deciding it's not worth believing. The fix for that isn't a better press release. It's a boring budget that shows up every year, locks in multi-year programs, and pays for private-side replacements without asterisks. It's rates that rise with lifeline protections so nobody loses water, while the city chases compliance. It's federal and state money that behaves like a partner, recurring, predictable, scaled to reality. The $100 billion line was a promise shaped for television. The network it's supposed to rescue runs under the pavement, day and night, indifferent to speeches. If the funding doesn't match the physics, the pipes keep teaching the lesson the hard way. To see how that plays out, follow one city as the calendar catches up. Case study, Jackson, Mississippi. The warnings in Jackson didn't arrive like a surprise. They accumulated, like rust on a valve no one could turn anymore. For years, the O.B. Curtis treatment plant limped along on deferred maintenance and prayer. Operators coaxed aging filters, patched pumps, and watched winter forecasts like gamblers reading clouds. When the deep freezes hit, everything fragile snapped at once. The first time, the city lost pressure for days. Residents lined up at distribution sites where the National Guard stacked pallets of bottled water under gray sky. Churches became logistics hubs. A dialysis center rerouted patients across county lines and changed out filters twice in a week. In kitchens across Jackson, families filled pots just in case the advisory changed, then changed again. Boil, cool, repeat. The noise wasn't just in faucets, it was in trust. Inside the plant, operators fought a battle with time and chemistry. Coagulant deliveries ran late. Motors tired and drew more amps than they should. The control system lagged, then crashed, forcing manual workarounds. On the distribution side, brakes multiplied. A depressurized zone drew in mud. The phone tree lit up with the same question, is it safe? The official answer hedged, Out of an abundance of caution, boil, because nobody wanted to say what everyone felt. The core system couldn't guarantee its promise. When the crisis peaked, the state declared an emergency. Water tankers rolled. The National Guard staged at fairgrounds and parking lots. Volunteers split shifts, handing 2 cases per car and apologizing when supplies ran out early. Hospitals improvised, trucking in sterile water and pausing elective procedures. Firefighters mapped live hydrants in real time and marked dead ones with tape. School cafeterias retooled menus to avoid anything that needed rinsing. The city posted updates, and residents posted videos of brown water that contradicted the words. Underneath the logistics was a fight over governance that had been simmering for years. Jackson's tax base had shrunk, wealth moved, businesses followed, and the rates didn't keep up with the maintenance curve. The plant needed capital upgrades a decade earlier. Instead, it got patches and a hope that no one storm would test every weak joint at once. When the state stepped in with emergency management, locals heard a different story. A city with a majority black population losing control over its own water. Every decision carried history. Every press conference carried subtext about power, responsibility, and neglect. Trust is cumulative too. Residents remembered boil water notices from summers past. They remembered days when pressure dropped low enough to trap air in the lines, banging pipes that sounded like warning drums. They remembered paying bills for water they didn't drink. A mother in South Jackson kept a calendar on her fridge with X's for every day she boiled. When her daughter asked why they couldn't just buy water forever, she did the math in her head and shook it off. The tap had to work. Federal help arrived with cameras and commitments. A consent decree outlined requirements. An interim manager took over operations. Contractors surveyed the plant and the network, triaged what to fix first, what to plan for next year. Some wins came quickly, new pumps, stabilized chemical feeds, backup generators tested and fueled. But the system beyond the fence, the mains, the valves, the service lines, still had to cooperate. Brakes didn't stop because a new manager signed in. Winter cold didn't respect the press release. Each fix exposed another layer of fragility. A rehabilitated filter bay revealed a clogged backwash line that starved another bay. A refurbished pump increased flow and found the weak gasket downstream. The SCADA screens brightened, but the data showed what old maps hid, pressure zones that were more suggestion than design. An asset inventory started from scratch, door by door, block by block, because records were incomplete and people needed to know what ran to their homes. Meanwhile, the bills kept coming. Rate structures that were already tight strained under the cost of emergency work and temporary systems. Affordability programs had to grow fast, or shutoffs would sabotage public health. Non-payment wasn't about defiance. It was about rent, gas, and groceries in a city where incomes lagged costs. The moral math clashed with the utility math, and both had to be rewritten in real time. At a neighborhood church, a family sat with 2 cases of bottled water and a stack of notices. The mother rationed what went to drinking and what went to cooking. The father tried to fix a leaking bathroom faucet because every drop felt like money thrown away. The son asked if he could brush his teeth with the tap. The answer changed depending on the day's status and the latest rumor. That uncertainty was the heaviest part. You can plan around scarcity, you can't plan around doubt. Jackson shows how physics, poverty, and politics tangle. The plant is the heart, but the body is the network, and the mind is trust. Temporary fixes stabilized pulses. Structural overhauls take years. Consent decrees write plans. Communities live through the gaps between line items and lived time. If a hydrant fails during a fire, nobody cares who owned the problem yesterday. Jackson isn't a cautionary tale from far away. It's a playbook many cities are already reading. Different latitude, same stresses, old pipes, thin budgets, rising stakes. The question is whether the next freeze or flood will test a system. It's whether the years before it were used to build muscle or just buy time. Case study, Newark and Chicago. While Jackson was rationing certainty, Newark was racing a clock. Corrosion control had slipped there too, and the numbers started to climb. First, uneasy, then undeniable. The city could have argued with spreadsheets. Instead, it picked up shovels. Newark's pivot was blunt. Stabilize chemistry, then tear the problem out of the ground. It looked chaotic from the curb and precise on the clipboard. Crews swarmed blocks in coordinated waves, locates, door knocks, dig, swap, restore. The city stacked financing, municipal bonds, federal aid, state revolving funds. They made one decision that changed the tempo: full replacement, free to the resident. No partials, no invoices at a kitchen table. That erased the pause at the door. Consent turned into signatures. A neighbor saw a crew replace a line by noon and asked when they could come tomorrow. On a side street in the Ironbound, a grandmother watched from her stoop while a backhoe traced a narrow trench from curb to cellar. The crew leader explained the plan in Portuguese and English because both were spoken on that block. 30 years of habit told her to distrust any government worker with a clipboard. Seeing the neighbor's hole filled, lawn patched, and water clear by dinner softened it. She signed. An hour later, her tap ran cold and bright. Within days, her daughter stopped flushing before filling the kettle. The sprint wasn't pretty. Asphalt cuts crisscrossed like stitches. Traffic detours annoyed everyone. But Newark learned the trick of industrial campaigns: simplify choices, standardize steps, and keep score in public. They published counts. Residents watched a number rise daily and believed the next block wasn't a rumor. Corrosion control kept the shield in place while lines disappeared for good. The city discovered what it didn't know: hidden lead where records said copper, copper where rumors said lead, and adjusted on the fly. They built a muscle that many cities never do: momentum. Then the scale shifts. Chicago's map isn't a sprint, it's a continent. The city installed lead service lines as policy long after others stopped. Dense blocks, alleys like capillaries, winters that lock soil in fists. The inventory reads like a novel with too many characters. 6 figures of service lines, many under sidewalks poured again and again. Replacing one means choreography with permits, utility locates, tree roots, and front yard fences that have migrated over property lines since the 1950s. Consent changes shape in Chicago. A landlord owns the private half. A tenant drinks the water. A permit needs a signature from someone who hasn't answered a letter in months. The utility offers free replacement. Suspicion meets it at the door. What's the catch? Will my rent go up? Will you tear up my garden and leave? Crews carry more than pipe. They carry translators, tenantrites flyers, and patience. Every no slows a block. Every no represents a child who'll keep drinking tap water through the waiting. The city has pilots, corridors of progress, and a priority matrix that tries to make ethics into routes. Daycares first, schools first, low-income blocks first. That raises its own friction. A two-flat owner on a quiet street wonders why their request sits while a school 10 blocks away jumps the line. The answer is public health, but fairness is felt, not graft. Chicago's pace reflects that tension, measured, incremental, always behind the headline about how many lines remain. There's another Chicago reality. Winters punish the schedule. You don't trench in frozen ground without paying a premium and risking shoddy restoration. Summer construction seasons turn into bottlenecks because every department wants the same streets open: sewer rehab, gas work, fiber installs. The city tries to stack projects to avoid digging twice, but coordination at that scale is a second job. Meanwhile, the chemistry has to hold steady year-round. Orthophosphate feed tanks can't freeze. A missed delivery, because of a blizzard, becomes a scramble to share chemical stock between plants before scales dissolve. Both cities offer a ledger of lessons. Newark proved that full, free replacement can turn hesitation into a cue, and that bonds buy speed when paired with relentless outreach. It also proved that mapping is a living act. Assumptions die at the curb. Chicago shows that scale demands different tools. Long-term workforce pipelines, union training slots earmarked for this work, legal pathways to secure consent in rental-heavy corridors, and affordability policies that make free truly mean free. Then there's the equity math. Who gets replaced first and who keeps waiting? The tidy answer is risk-based prioritization. The lived answer is that neighborhoods with more time, language access, and bandwidth advocate louder. Newark quieted that by knocking on every door on a block, not just the doors that called. Chicago's challenge is to match that block-by-block ethic at a size that swallows good intentions. Here's the throughline back to the kitchen sink. A parent in Newark turns on a tap today and doesn't wonder what's under the lawn anymore. A parent in Chicago still flushes first and keeps a filter cartridge calendar. Both are right, given their cities' realities. Both deserve the same ending. The map decides the method. The promise decides the pace. The small town trap. While big cities wrestle with maps and mandates, thousands of small towns are trying to keep the lights on at the plant. Their water towers rise over football fields and grain silos, the pride of a place you can cross in 6 minutes. Under that skyline sits a treatment skid from 1989, a chlorine room that smells sharper than it should, and a single operator whose phone never sleeps. Start with scale turned inside out. A system serving 1,800 people has one certified operator on paper, and in reality, one person who is also the billing clerk, the meter reader, the backhoe driver, and the de facto IT department for a control screen that crashes when the power flickers. He knows the whole network by memory, the good valve on Willow, the stubborn hydrant by the old feed store, but he also knows he's the last of his kind. The apprentice he's been training took a job 2 counties over for $3 more an hour, and a health plan that covers braces. Compliance arrives as envelopes. Sample this many taps for lead, pull quarterly bacteriologicals, add PFAS to the list, ship to a lab 2 states away, wait for results you'll have to explain at a council meeting held in a room with a Coke machine humming in the corner. If something spikes, you print boil water notices in the clerk's office, staple them to telephone poles, and hope everyone sees the Facebook post. There's no comms team. There's a cousin who knows how to make a PDF. The budget is a ledger of hard choices. Rates are low because wages are low, and $1 more a month means something. The city raises them anyway, a little, and hopes no one moves outside the service boundary to a private well. The revolving fund loan looks generous until you read the match requirement and the engineering fees. A PFAS hit means a carbon system that costs more than the town's annual payroll. A lead service line mandate means knocking on doors where a landlord lives out of state and the tenant pays cash. In a mobile home park on the edge of town, the stakes sharpen. The park has its own tiny system, 2 wells, a pressure tank, a maze of PVC laterals patched over decades. The owner lives 3 hours away. The operator comes twice a week and juggles chlorine doses around weather because rainfall turns the well field to soup. When a boil notice goes up, residents find out at the laundromat. Cartridges in the few store-bought filters get turned upside down to eke out another week. A grandmother fills a bucket for dishes and adds a splash of bleach because someone told her it helps. It doesn't, not like that. Schools on wells sit in this trap too. The superintendent is also the transportation director. A letter from the state says test for lead at every fixture. He walks the halls with a clipboard at dawn, taps running, labels smearing because the marker is old. The results come back with a few fixtures over the limit. He posts signs, do not drink. Bottled water budgets weren't in the levy. He calls parents and says lunch will be cold until they can swap faucets and install point-of-use filters in the nurse's office and the cafeteria. A 5th grader asks the teacher if the water hurts your brain. The teacher says, "We are fixing it," and believes it because the alternative is impossible. Meanwhile, tribes are told to apply through a different program with different forms to fix the same failing hardware. Their systems are remote, their roads wash out, their vendor list is thin. A single delivery missed because a bridge is out pushes a plant into hand-to-mouth dosing. The operator sleeps on a cot because the generator is temperamental and the wind is up again. Every solution offered at conferences lands differently here. Consolidation, it sounds efficient until the next town over wants voting control and the rates that come with their debt, not yours. Regionalization, good on paper, thin on the ground when the only pipe between you is a 12-inch line installed for irrigation that can't handle a fire flow plus your peak hour. Shared services, yes, please, except both counties cut staff in 2009 and never filled the positions. The trap is identity as much as money. Water is local, it's proof a place can take care of itself. Hand that to a distant authority and you admit you can't. Hold on too long and you risk a midnight failure that forces the hand anyway. Somewhere in that tension sits a town clerk with a stack of shut-off notices they don't want to mail because they know every name on the list. Small towns aren't footnotes. They're where the promises of clean water are tested without a safety net. Their fixes will be humble and specific. A shared circuit rider who rotates through 5 plants, a grant writer hired jointly by 3 councils, a policy that bans partial lead replacements, paired with a county bond that makes private side free, a PFAS pilot skid on a trailer that moves seasonally to hot spots. Boring steps, repeated. That's how a place this size climbs out, quietly, stubbornly, and with no ribbon to cut. Law, liability, and the blame game. Regulations read like certainty until water turns brown. Then every clause becomes a weapon or a shield. The EPA's rules set the floor. The lead and copper rule says control corrosion, sample the right taps, replace lines on a schedule that tightens when results creep up. New PFAS standards add numbers that utilities must hit even if the technology and money arrive late. Timelines look clean on slides. On the ground, they collide with winter, labor shortages, and invoices. Ownership is the first fault line. The city owns the main. Homeowners often own the service line on their property. That split made sense when a pipe was just plumbing. It doesn't when the pipe can poison a child. Mandates say replace all lead service lines. Legal boundaries say the city can't dig on private land without consent. Health says partial replacement can spike lead. Budgets say there's no line item for thousands per home. That's how a technical requirement becomes a moral standoff at the curb. Compliance doesn't ask if you can afford it. Missampling windows and letters go out, penalties accrue, trust erodes. Some systems undersample by mistake, some choose easy taps that tend to test low. When auditors catch patterns, consent orders follow. A consent decree doesn't fix a pipe. It fixes the calendar and the consequences. It forces the utility to hit milestones and file reports, month after month, under court oversight. Residents want that pressure. Operators feel it as a second job stacked on top of the first. Meanwhile, PFAS moves the fight to the courthouse. Cities sue manufacturers, airports, and in some cases, the Department of Defense, arguing that firefighting foam and industrial chemistry seeded their aquifers. The settlements make headlines with big numbers and careful language. Funds are allocated by formulas, released in tranches, and restricted to certain uses: testing, equipment, not necessarily operating costs or disposal of concentrated waste. A city adds up its needs and finds the check covers the pilot skid, not the long-term bill. The manufacturer denies causation, cites compliance with the regulations of the time, and points to shared responsibility. The docket grows. Insurance was supposed to catch the worst days. Policies now arrive with exclusions: no coverage for gradual contamination, no coverage for PFAS, tighter triggers for sudden and accidental. Premiums climb for systems with violation histories. Underwriters read advisories like weather reports. The bond market reads all of this, prices risk, and nudges interest rates up for the very utilities that need affordable debt to rebuild. Finance becomes faith. Governance adds its own tangle. In places with repeated failures, states appoint emergency managers or outside operators. The goal is stability. The message can sound like dispossession. Residents who already felt unheard now watch decisions move farther away. A manager focuses on compliance metrics, residuals, turbidity, replacement counts, because that's how the decree is written. People ask a simpler question: can I drink from the tap without boiling, filtering, or praying? Both are valid. Only one is visible on a dashboard. Blame settles where records are weakest. Why didn't you map the lead lines? Why didn't you order chemicals sooner? Why didn't you fix that valve last year? The answers live in budget votes, retirements, empty chairs at utility boards, and a culture that forgave deferral because nothing had exploded yet. A new director inherits the backlog and the anger. They find file cabinets, hand-drawn atlases, and a billing system that can't flag high-risk homes. They also find a community that keeps jars under the sink for proof. Lawyers become translators. They explain that a maximum contaminant level is a legal limit, not a magic health line. They explain that advisory language is calibrated to avoid panic and liability, which sounds like hedging to a parent mixing formula. They explain that the new PFAS rule uses a hazard index that accounts for multiple compounds together: smart policy, opaque to the public. People hear index and think excuse. And then there's the shut-off switch. Utilities use it to enforce payment. Public health advocates say water is a human right, and shutting off service during contamination crises or affordability shocks is cruelty and folly. Cities experiment with lifeline rates, reduce charges for a basic volume, paired with arrears forgiveness when problems were on the utilities side. It's messy, It's necessary. A shutoff at the wrong time creates the very outbreaks regulations were written to prevent. One afternoon, a council chamber hosts a scene that repeats across the country. A resident holds up a filter cartridge, heavy with months of use, and asks who pays for the next one. The utility lawyer quotes the code, "Private plumbing is private." A pediatrician at the back shakes her head and says the code is killing kids. The finance director says debt service is due. A state inspector sits quietly, taking notes for the next report. Everyone is right within their lane. The lanes don't meet. The path out isn't dramatic. It's legal alignment with physical reality. Make full lead replacement the only legal option and fund the private side. Write affordability into mandates so compliance doesn't crush the poorest households. Let settlement dollars cover operations, not just shiny equipment, and require public dashboards that show spending, sampling, and schedules in plain language. Tie bond ratings to transparency and maintenance, not just crisis response. Protect operators who tell uncomfortable truths. Penalize data games, not honest misses with honest plans. What nobody knew when the pipes were laid is what everyone knows now. Liability travels with water. If the law lags the science, people pay with their bodies. If finance ignores risk until it's a headline, communities pay double. The blame game ends the day rules, money, and engineering point in the same direction and stay there longer than a press cycle. Inside the treatment plant. Open the door and the air changes. It smells like wet stone and bleach, like a swimming pool with a job. This is where raw water becomes a promise, minute by minute. Nothing here is glamorous, everything matters. Start with coagulation, the quiet choreography. Operators dose a coagulant into raw water and watch as invisible particles find each other. In flock basins, slow paddles turn, and the water clouds with soft clusters that grow heavy enough to sink. Sedimentation basins hold their breath while gravity does work. If the temperature drops overnight, viscosity shifts and the flock won't settle as fast. Operators tweak doses in inches, not feet. Too little and the filters get hammered. Too much and the finished water carries a chemical fingerprint residents will taste. Filtration is the second gate. Beds of sand and anthracite pull out what eyes and flock missed. Head loss gauges climb like heart rates when filters are tired. Backwash too soon and you waste water. Wait too long and you drive fines through the bed. Backwash itself is a dance. Air scours, water surges, media lifts and resettles. Do it wrong and you stratify the bed, leaving channels where pathogens can slip by. A veteran operator can hear a bad backwash from the pitch of the pipes. A new hire checks a screen and hopes the sensor is honest. Disinfection draws the line between safe and not. Chlorine or chloramines in some systems must linger long enough to kill. Contact time is math against flow. Push the plant too hard during a fire or a heat wave and that math trims close. Residuals need to survive the miles of pipe, the dead ends, the storage tanks that turn water over too slowly on quiet days. Overdose and you trigger taste complaints and disinfection byproducts later. Underdose and you run on luck. Corrosion control isn't a single valve, it's a tempo. Orthophosphate must meet the water with consistency, pH must sit in the lane where pipes stay passive. A delivery delay can become a system-wide risk. When a tanker gets stranded by a storm, operators stretch inventory, swap to smaller feed pumps, and reroute tanks. They call neighboring plants for a loan the way hospitals call for blood. Nobody posts these phone calls. They're the difference between steady and brittle. Behind the glass, SCADA screens plot flows, levels, and alarms. The lights make it look easy. It is. A cyber scare somewhere else can push a plant offline as a precaution. A firmware update bricks a controller at 2 a.m. Operators pull out binders and run on muscle memory, manual valves, handwritten logs, radios. Backup power kicks in if it's fueled and tested. If it isn't, raw water keeps coming while the inside goes dark. A generator that only runs during drills is a luxury. One that runs during storms is a lifeline. Supply chains creep into every pipe. Alum, caustic, polymer, chlorine, each is a contract with a vendor who might be short this month because a rail strikes stranded cars 3 states away. Prices spike. A purchasing rule that demands low bid can trap a utility into a vendor who can't deliver. Operators become negotiators, stretching drums, swapping brands, revalidating doses under pressure. Meanwhile, energy bills swing with the grid. A heat dome turns pumps into hungry metal. Human error rides alongside expertise. Night shift is thin. A trainee keys the wrong setpoint and starts a cascade, more coagulant, more sludge, more backwashes, less contact time. The chief catches it by feel, a number that shouldn't be that high, and talks the room down. The plant writes a corrective action. The public never hears about the save. They only hear about the notice when one comes too late. Resilience upgrades promise calm. Backup power, redundant chemical feeds, duplicate pumps, hardwired alarms that call cell phones directly. They're expensive and boring, which means they're the first things cut in a tight year. Cybersecurity audits flag default passwords on remote logins. It asks for budget to segment networks. A council funds a splash pad instead. Months later, a ransom note locks a workstation, and the plant reverts to clipboards while the city learns about air gaps. Run to failure sounds thrifty until a filter collapses. Plants designed in a different climate now operate in heat and floods. Ash from wildfires lands in reservoirs and turns raw water into tea. The coagulant dose that worked last summer fails by noon today. Operators pivot, but every pivot eats margin. A treatment plant is a heart that can't afford arrhythmia. What keeps it beating is people who know their water. They taste it from a sample tap at dawn. They carry a mental map of every quirk in every train. They train rookies to hear a pump bearing before it seizes, to trust a grab sample when a sensor lies, to call early when a shipment looks late. If the city wants fewer advisories and fewer podium apologies, it has to pay for that memory, for spares on the shelf, for diesel in the tank, and for screens that don't go dark when the storm hits. The plant holds the line. It needs a city that holds it up. Decades of deferred investment. To understand how a 24/7 promise got this fragile, go back to the build-out. After World War II, cities laid pipe like arteries into new suburbs. Cheap money, cheap materials, and a belief that growth would keep paying the bill. Treatment plants rose along rivers with room to expand. By the 1970s, federal laws pushed standards higher. Grants flowed. Filters were added, disinfection tightened, and sewage plants stopped dumping raw waste. It felt like water had graduated into adulthood. Then the curve bent. The federal share began to shrink. What used to arrive as grants morphed into loans, then into revolving funds with matches that assumed cities had cash. Maintenance turned into a local problem, tucked into rate studies that landed on council agendas where parks and police carried better applause. The pipes kept working. That was the argument for waiting. Out of sight, out of budget hardened into policy. Asset management, cataloging every pipe, ranking risk, planning replacements, was the boring craft that never made headlines. Crisis patching did. A main breaks, a crew fixes, a photo hits the paper. The underlying map stayed fuzzy. Retirements took memory with them. A foreman who could point to the weak clay on Elm left, and with him went the unwritten plan for spring. Meanwhile, political incentives skewed toward ribbon cuttings. A new plaza earns a speech. A rebuilt valve chamber earns a receipt. Bonds for visible projects pass easier than bonds for buried ones. Rate increases trigger anger, especially where incomes stagnate. Leaders learn to talk about efficiency, not replacement. Efficiency bought years by squeezing staff and skipping preventive work. The bill didn't vanish, it aged. Climate pressed on top of that neglect. Systems designed for yesterday's weather hit today's extremes. Deep freezes in places that budgeted for mild winters, megastorms that turned 100-year floods into 3-year events, droughts that warmed reservoirs and fed blooms that treatment trains weren't tuned for. Plants optimized for a temperate average now swing from one edge case to the other. Pumps run harder during heat waves to keep towers full. Pipes that survived a century of winters now face freeze-thaw whiplash that doubles the stress. The hidden deficit isn't just metal and concrete, it's people. Certification pipelines thinned as utilities trimmed training to meet payroll. Young operators arrived to blinking screens with fewer mentors at their shoulders. Engineers rotated through consulting firms, good at projects, less tied to the lifetime arc of a system. Institutional memory, why Zone 3 never liked a steep ramp-up, why the East Tank turned in winter, became folklore instead of policy. Finance amplified the gap. When bonds were cheap, some cities moved, many didn't. Those that waited woke up to higher interest and harsher underwriting. Violation histories nudged rates up. A utility that needed $300 million over a decade found that debt service itself ate the very budget meant for backups and spares. Insurance tightened too, excluding slow losses and contamination, leaving cities exposed to the long emergencies that define water. Every choice to postpone wrote a quiet IOU to the future. Skip valve exercising, expect stuck gates during the next break. Delay tank repainting, expect rust that becomes a structural job, not just a cosmetic one. Run filters past recommended cycles, expect media that fails when ash hits the intake after a wildfire 100 miles away. Each deferral saves a line item today and adds a zero tomorrow. Communities felt the drift as trust erosion. Notices came more often. Oil hung on fridge magnets like a second calendar. Parents learned residual numbers before football scores. Ratepayers asked a fair question, what did you do with last year's increase? Utilities answered with spreadsheets that didn't feel like water. Without visible progress, maps, counts, deadlines, support thinned. Apathy set in where anger used to be. That's dangerous, because apathy removes the pressure that forces budgets to face buried truth. Some places tried to reverse the slope. They built asset plans that survived elections, set aside depreciation funds, and adopted lifeline rates to keep the poorest connected while raising overall revenue. They published dashboards that showed lead lines vanishing and mains replaced by mile. They treated affordability as part of resilience, not as a charity line. They hired apprentices on purpose and paid veterans to stay long enough to teach. But those were the exceptions. Most systems lived year to year, grant to grant, headline to headline. When PFAS landed, the cupboard was already thin. When lead deadlines tightened, crews were already tired. When storms hit, generators stuttered because fuel contracts were an afterthought. The brittleness wasn't mysterious. It was math, weather, and the politics of what gets applause. There's a phrase operators use, fix it on your terms or it'll fix itself on its terms. Decades of deferral handed the terms to time. The path back isn't glamorous. It's budgets that treat pipes like payroll, recurring, protected, boring. It's laws that align ownership with health and money with mandates. It's leadership that chooses maintenance over monuments and accepts that success is nothing happening day after day. That quiet is the sound of investment finally catching up. Fixes that actually work. The fixes that matter aren't flashy. They're systematic, repeatable, and built to outlast a news cycle. Start with the obvious one we kept delaying, full lead service line replacement. The cities that win make it free at the tap, curb to meter, meter to faucet. They stop arguing about ownership splits and treat the line as one thing because that's how water treats it. They inventory with intent, hydrovac spots to confirm materials, predictive modeling to prioritize blocks, and door-to-door consent teams who speak the neighborhood's languages. Then they standardize. Same crews, same fittings, same restoration playbook, same follow-up sampling. They publish maps that update daily so residents see progress, not promises. Certified filters and orthophosphate stay in place as a guardrail until the last lead is out. Speed comes from logistics, not heroics. A city sets up a materials yard like a small factory, pipes staged by length, service saddles kitted by street, meters pre-programmed. Inspectors ride with crews instead of waiting for paperwork. Restoration is treated as part of health, not an afterthought. Grass reseeded, concrete poured, fences put back straight. People sign faster when their block looks whole by dinner. A helpline returns calls the same day. A follow-up sample bottle shows up with clear instructions and a prepaid label. Trust grows because the loop closes. Trenchless methods help when streets are narrow and time is tight. Pipe bursting replaces brittle mains without open-cutting an entire avenue. A head drags new pipe through the old, expanding as it goes. It's fast and spares trees and driveways, but it's not a silver bullet. Brittle host pipe can shatter and damage laterals. Cured-in-place lining patches leaks and adds years, yet it can trap contamination if prep is sloppy and can shed chemicals if cure temperatures aren't right. UV-cured liners and strict quality controls reduce those risks. Smart programs treat trenchless as a tool, not a default. Great for structurally sound but leaky mains, wrong for pipes with zero remaining life. They pair it with more valves to create smaller zones, so a single break doesn't black out half a city. PFAS needs a different muscle. Granular activated carbon is the workhorse. Big vessels, long contact time, Frequent media changes when concentrations are high. It's proven and scalable. Ion exchange resins pull PFAS efficiently at lower contact times, stretching footprints and saving power, but they generate spent resin that needs careful handling. High-pressure membranes deliver the cleanest cut and remove a suite of contaminants together, yet they create a concentrated waste stream and steep energy bills. The fix that works is the one matched to the water. Pilots run side by side, vendors log breakthrough curves, and operators pick the train that hits the new limits with room to spare. The plan includes disposal from day one, not as a footnote. Some utilities co-locate regeneration or negotiate take-back contracts. They budget to swap media before the curve turns ugly, not after. Regionalization can turn fragility into bench strength. A cluster of small towns shares a lab tech, a circuit rider operator, a grant writer, a vacuum truck, and a backup generator fleet. They set joint procurement for chemicals and parts so a rail delay in one place doesn't cascade into a region-wide shortage. They align cross-connection control so a contamination in one system doesn't sneak across a shared line. Governance follows slowly. Start with shared services, build trust, then consider merging systems where pipes already connect. It's not about surrendering identity, it's about sharing muscle memory. Pressure management is cheap resilience. Sensors at hydrants and key nodes feed real-time data. District-metered areas reveal leaks you can't see. Variable speed drives smooth pump starts to avoid water hammer that cracks old joints. Surge tanks and additional valves carve the grid into defensible zones. A crew can isolate a block without starving a hospital. Break frequency drops. So does non-revenue water that was quietly bleeding budgets. On the customer side, smart meters do more than send bills. They flag continuous flow that screams underground leak at 3 a.m. They show tenants and owners their spikes, and they let a utility run affordability programs with precision, waive leak charges once with proof of fix, then help with repairs through a vetted plumber list. Pair that with lifeline rates that guarantee a basic volume at low cost, and shutoffs stop being the blunt instrument they've been. Somebody still has to pay for the pipe, so cities stack funds. State revolving fund loans for core projects, federal grants for hazard-driven upgrades, bonds for multi-year programs, settlement dollars for PFAS equipment and operations, local affordability surcharges that are small but protected. Communication is its own infrastructure. Real-time dashboards show turbidity, residuals, PFAS progress, lead replacement counts, and project schedules in plain language. Sampling locations are dots you can click, not PDF appendices. Notices say what happened, what's being done today, and how to get a filter today, not next week. Door hangers don't hedge. Call centers answer in minutes, not hours. Schools and hospitals get priority lines and audits every quarter. When supply chains wobble, the city says so and shows the contingency. People can handle bad news, they hate being surprised. The last fix is workforce. Utilities partner with unions and community colleges to fund apprenticeships that pay while you learn. Pipelines bring in veterans, second career parents, and high school grads who don't want debt. Senior operators get bonuses for mentorship, not just for overtime. Certification fees and exam prep are paid. Crews rotate to avoid burnout during summer construction and winter break seasons. Cyber techs sit next to operators during drills, so the plant doesn't freeze when a login does. None of this makes a headline. All of it lowers advisories, shortens outages, and lifts trust. The cities that get ahead decide that boring wins. They lock money to maintenance, treat private side lead as public business, pick PFAS trains that fit their water and wallets, share muscle across boundaries, and keep score where everyone can see. That's how a promise stops wobbling and starts holding. People, trust, and the information gap. Trust doesn't break with one bad glass. It leaks one hedged sentence at a time. When water turns questionable, people don't want a pamphlet. They want straight talk now. That means posting sampling results in real time, not quarterly PDFs 2 clicks deep. A simple dashboard, what you pulled yesterday, which block you sampled, what the number means, beats a press conference. Plain language beats legal cushions. We saw a spike on Maple. We flushed, resampled, and here's the plan by 5 p.m. That's how you begin to rebuild. Transparency has a shape. Show maps with dots where taps were tested. Color them. Click to see the date, the value, and whether filter was offered. Post the corrosion control dose and the storage tank turnover so people know you're watching the right dials. If a delivery is late, say so and explain the backup. Don't tell residents not to worry, show them why they shouldn't. If you don't know, say that too and commit to the next update hour. Silence turns rumors into fact. When the official story runs slow, communities improvise. Parents organize tap testing with third-party labs. A local nonprofit hands out filters and tracks serial numbers in a shared spreadsheet. University researchers join weekend sampling drives, validating protocols and helping interpret results that would otherwise sit on refrigerators like talismans. Community science can be messy, but it's honest labor that fills the gap between doubt and data. Wise utilities invited in, share chain of custody coolers, co-host results nights, and fix what those results reveal. The memory of being misled is heavy. Flint taught people to hear within limits as a loophole. Once trust fractures, every future advisory sounds like a cover. It can take years of boring accuracy to earn back a single week of certainty. That means aligning words and water under stress. If you say do not drink, pair it with delivery routes and hours. If you say filters remove this, show the model numbers, the certification, and where to get cartridges free. If you say we're replacing lines, text when crews are on your street, not just when they finish. Schools and hospitals are the test of seriousness. They use water in ways that amplify risk, mixing formula, sterilizing tools, feeding hundreds. They need audits, not assumptions, fixture inventories, lead-free verification, PFAS point-of-use pilots where central treatment lags, and quarterly walkthroughs that fix dead-end lines before they go stale. Priority phone lines should ring straight to an operator with authority. When the city presents progress, the first slides should be school kitchens and dialysis units, not ceremonial shovels. Trust also lives in small moments. A family's filter runs dry on a Sunday. The hotline answers, confirms stock at the library, and logs the pickup to schedule a cartridge swap before the next month. A nurse calls about a cloudy flush in the pediatric ward. An operator drives over, pulls a sample, and explains face-to-face why a recent valve exercise stirred sediment but didn't threaten disinfectant residuals. These are 15-minute fixes that compound into confidence. Language matters. People don't parse action level, MCL, or hazard index. They understand safe for bottle feeding or use bottled water for infants and chemotherapy patients until Tuesday. They understand flush for 5 minutes if you explain why and how to set a timer on a phone. They understand when you say, we'll be back on your block at 9 a.m. to take another sample. You can watch. Precision beats polish. Misinformation thrives where detail thins. A viral post says filters don't work. Answer with a demo at a community center, 2 taps, raw and filtered, with on-the-spot strips to show what changes and what doesn't. Invite skeptics, stream it. Let the pediatrician, the plumber, and the plant operator stand shoulder to shoulder and field questions. People trust other people more than they trust logos. Outreach can't be one language, one channel. Door hangers in English miss half a neighborhood. Robocalls bounce off prepaid numbers. Solve that with block captains, church announcements, WhatsApp groups, and flyers at laundromats. Pay community liaison stipends. Stop calling it volunteer work when it keeps a city standing. Track who you reached and who you didn't. The map of missed doors is a to-do list, not a shrug. There's a difference between apologizing and owning. We regret the inconvenience is corporate air. We failed to maintain pressure. Here's what broke, what we replaced today, and how we're changing the schedule so this zone doesn't go dry again, is human. Pair that with a bill credit for the advisory window and free cartridges until 2 consecutive clean samples, and the apology becomes policy. The last piece is consistency. Don't speak only in crisis. Hold monthly water nights where operators explain how the plant is running, what projects are underway, and what could go wrong next season. Share scares you avoided. Publish the lead replacement count with names blacked out but addresses intact, so neighbors can verify reality. Celebrate a quiet month without boasting. The day people stop refreshing the dashboard because they trust the tap, you'll know the bridge is holding. Trust isn't a campaign, it's maintenance. Just like valves and tanks, it needs exercising, inspection, and parts on hand. Lose it, and nothing else in the system works the way it should. Build it, and a city can live through repairs without losing its mind or its children's future. The next 10 years, Deadlines are no longer abstract. The clock on lead inventories is ticking while trucks and crews are already booked 2 towns over. Cities will discover that their maps are half story, half guess, and the guesswork ends at a backhoe's edge. The first 3 years belong to inventory, hydrovac confirmations, predictive models corrected at the curb, and a sober count of how many lines, valves, and fittings you actually need. The revelation won't be comfortable. It never is when paper meets dirt. Labor becomes the second bottleneck. Retirements crest just as mandates tighten. Apprenticeship classes fill, but certifications take time and repetition. Cities that planned workforce pipelines yesterday will be the ones with crews tomorrow. Everyone else will fight over the same contractor rosters and pay premiums for speed that evaporates when winter locks the ground. That's when the math forces a pivot from heroics to factory discipline, standard kits, rolling yards, and schedules that flow like assembly lines, not political calendars. Climate will grade every plan. A megastorm will redraw what 100-year means. Deep freezes will visit latitudes that thought they were safe. Wildfire ash will land in reservoirs and turn coagulation into improvisation. Systems will pass or fail based on whether redundancy exists before the storm, not after the press conference. Backup power will either be fueled and tested or wishful thinking. Supply chains for chemicals and media will be negotiated regionally, with mutual aid letters that read like binding contracts, because vendor guarantees won't matter if rails or roads are down. PFAS treatment will move from pilot to permanent. Utilities will learn their curves. The day media breaks through, the week replacement is late, the month waste contracts run out. Disposal will become the quiet crisis, a concentrated stream with no easy home. Some states will build shared regeneration hubs. Others will stall, forcing utilities to store drums and pray for permits. Rate cases will fold in operating costs that aren't one-time spikes, but monthly gravity. Migration will follow reliability. Employers will read water dashboards before ribbon cuttings. Families will choose a mortgage where taps are boring. 2 Americas are possible: neighborhoods with lead-free lines, steady pressure, and PFAS below new limits, and neighborhoods managing boil notices as a season. Capital goes where risk is managed. So do teachers, nurses, and the next class of operators. Fix is not a miracle year. It's 10 consecutive budgets that treat pipe like payroll. Federal money that behaves like a partner, recurring, predictable, scaled, will separate cities that crawl from cities that climb. State revolving funds will reward asset management and affordability plans, not just project lists. Bond ratings will quietly hinge on transparency and maintenance rates, not on festival grounds and plazas. Consent decrees will add lifeline rates as a compliance metric. Settlements will fund operations, not just equipment. Regionalization will grow not from mandates, but from need. Shared labs, circuit riders, generator pools, and cross-trained rosters will knit towns together. Consolidation will follow pipes already in the ground. Local pride won't vanish. It will shift to shared competence. The small-town trap loosens when help isn't a surrender, but a subscription. Trust will be the hinge. Cities that publish real-time data, answer the phone on Sundays, and show door-by-door progress will get permission to dig, raise rates with protection for the poorest, and make mistakes without losing the room. Schools and hospitals will stay at the top of the list. Filters will be free where needed, with cartridges that show up before they run out. The distance between a dashboard update and a knock on the door will shrink. By year 10, maps can look different. Lead gone, not pledged away. PFAS trains humming with predictable swaps. Pressure zones right-sized so a break doesn't darken a hospital. Operators who weren't born when the last big plant upgrade happened will be training the next class. Residents won't know the names of coagulants, and that will be a win. Quiet will read like competence, not luck. None of this happens by speech. It happens by line items that repeat and choices that favor boring over bright. That's the decade. Maintenance as a value, not a chore. If the promise means anything, it has to survive elections, storms, and headlines. It has to sound like water from a tap that never needs an explanation. Resolution and call to action. Clean water is either a promise we fund every year or a lie we live with in quiet, harmful increments. Pull your city's lead and PFAS inventories, demand door-level maps and real-time dashboards, and push for full, free lead replacements with funded cartridge programs today. Subscribe and watch our Great Lakes Deep Dive to see how upstream choices set your tap's fate and what you can do before the next advisory lands.